In the dead of night, under a sky choked with storm clouds, four friends stood at the edge of an abandoned cemetery, their flashlights cutting through the fog like knives. They were laughing, daring each other to step closer to the crumbling headstones. But what they unearthed that night would bind them in a web of terror they could never escape. It started with a simple game, a childish bet to dig up what they thought was just dirt and forgotten history. But as the shovel hit something solid, a chill wind whispered through the trees, and in that moment they awakened a shadow that would follow them home, night after night, claiming them one by one. What was it that lurked in the forgotten grave, and why did it refuse to let them go? It all began on a crisp autumn afternoon in the small town of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, where the leaves turned fiery red and the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Jake, Mia, Tyler, and Sarah had been inseparable since middle school, the kind of friends who turned every ordinary day into an adventure. Jake was the bold one, always pushing boundaries with his infectious grin and wild ideas. Mia, with her sharp wit and camera always in hand, documented their escapades for fun. Tyler was the quiet thinker, the one who analyzed everything, and Sarah brought the heart, her empathy, making sure no one felt left out. That day, they were bored out of their minds after school let out early. The town was gearing up for Halloween, with pumpkins lining porches and fake cobwebs draped over fences. But the friends wanted something real, something thrilling. "Hey, why don't we check out the old cemetery on the hill?" Jake suggested, his eyes lighting up. "I heard it's haunted. People say no one's been buried there since the 1800s. The others hesitated at first. Mia rolled her eyes, calling it cliché, but Tyler shrugged and said, "What's the harm? It's just overgrown grass and stones." Sarah, ever the peacemaker, agreed as long as they didn't do anything stupid. They grabbed snacks from the corner store, bags of chips and sodas, and hiked up the winding path to the cemetery as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the wrought iron gate that creaked open with a reluctant groan. The place was eerie, sure enough. Headstones tilted at odd angles, names faded by time, vines snaking over marble like possessive fingers. But to the friends, it felt more like a playground than a place of rest. They wandered between the rows, reading inscriptions aloud in dramatic voices, laughing at the outdated names like Ebenezer and Prudence. That's when they found it. The forgotten grave. Tucked away in a corner, half buried under a tangle of weeds and fallen leaves, the headstone was barely visible. No name, no dates, just a crude carving of a cross that looked like it had been etched in haste. "This one's ancient," Tyler said, kneeling down to brush away the dirt. "Bet it's from the Revolutionary War or something." Jake, never one to back down, pulled a small folding shovel from his backpack. He always carried random gear for adventures. "Let's see what's under there," he joked. But there was a glint in his eye that said he was serious. The others protested half-heartedly. "Come on, Jake, that's disrespectful," Sarah whispered, glancing around as if someone might be watching. Mia snapped a photo anyway, the flash illuminating the stone like a lightning strike. But Jake started digging, the soil soft and yielding after recent rains. At first it was just dirt. But then the shovel clanged against something hard. They all froze. "Probably a rock," muttered Tyler, but his voice wavered. Curiosity won out, and soon they were all helping, pulling away clumps of earth until they uncovered a small wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, its surface rotted and splintered. Inside, nestled in faded cloth, was a tarnished silver locket, engraved with intricate patterns that swirled like smoke. No pictures inside, just an empty oval frame where a portrait might have once been. "Whoa, treasure!" Jake exclaimed, holding it up. But as he did, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the cemetery, rustling the leaves and extinguishing their flashlights one by one. The air grew colder, unnaturally so, and for a split second, Sarah swore she saw a shadow detach from the trees, hovering at the edge of their vision. They laughed it off as nerves, pocketed the locket as a souvenir, and hurried home as dusk fell, the box reburied haphazardly. That night, the haunting began subtly, like a whisper you dismiss as the wind. Jake was the first. He woke around 2 a.m., his room pitch black except for the glow of his phone charging on the nightstand. But something felt off. The air was heavy, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and that's when he saw it. A shadow in the corner of the room, darker than the surrounding darkness, shaped vaguely like a human silhouette, but stretched unnaturally tall. It didn't move, just watched. Jake blinked, and it was gone. He shook it off as a nightmare, but sleep evaded him the rest of the night. The next morning, over breakfast at the local diner, he mentioned it casually. "Weird dream last night. Felt like someone was in my room." Mia chuckled, showing them the photos she'd taken of the grave. "Probably guilt for grave robbing," she teased. But Tyler frowned, scrolling through his phone. "I looked up that cemetery online. Turns out it's called Forgotten Hill because a lot of graves there are unmarked. People who died in some old epidemic, buried quickly to stop the spread." Sarah shivered. "Can we not talk about this? It gives me the creeps." That evening, it was Mia's turn. She was editing photos on her laptop in her cozy attic room, the locket dangling from a chain around her neck. She'd claimed it as a quirky accessory. As the clock ticked past midnight, her screen flickered and the room's temperature plummeted. She glanced up, and there it was, the shadow, this time closer, standing at the foot of her bed. It seemed to pulse, like it was breathing, and Mia felt a wave of dread wash over her, her heart pounding in her ears. She reached for her lamp, but before she could switch it on, the shadow dissolved into the walls. Terrified, she texted the group. "Guys, something weird just happened. That shadow thing Jake mentioned, I saw it too." By the third night, panic started to set in. Tyler was alone in his basement, tinkering with an old radio he'd found at a garage sale. The static crackled, and suddenly a faint voice emerged, not from the speakers, but from behind him. It was a whisper, indistinct, like wind through dry leaves. He spun around, and the shadow was there, inches away, its form twisting as if in pain. Tyler bolted upstairs, locking the door. But the whisper lingered in his mind, echoing words he couldn't quite make out. Sarah was last that week. She was the most sensitive of the group, and when the shadow came to her, it felt personal. Curled up in bed with a book, she felt the room shift, the pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen breath. The shadow loomed over her, and in that moment, she sensed an overwhelming sadness emanating from it, not malice, but a deep, aching loneliness. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, "What do you want?" But it vanished, leaving her trembling. The friends met the next day at their usual spot in the park, faces pale and eyes ringed with exhaustion. "This can't be a coincidence," Tyler said, his voice low. "It started after we dug up that grave." They pieced it together. The shadow visited one of them each night, growing bolder, more insistent. Jake suggested returning the locket to the cemetery, hoping that would end it. But as they drove back up the hill that afternoon, storm clouds gathered, mirroring the dread in their hearts. At the grave, they redug the spot, hands shaking. As they placed the locket back in the box, a rumble of thunder shook the ground. And then, in the fading light, they saw etchings on the inside of the locket they'd missed before. Faint letters spelling E. Harlow, 1852. Tyler quickly searched on his phone. Eliza Harlow, a young woman who died alone during a cholera outbreak, her family too afraid to claim her body. Buried in haste, forgotten by time. But as they covered the earth, the shadow appeared, not in the night, but in broad daylight, circling them like a vortex of darkness. The friends clung together, hearts racing as whispers filled the air. Fragments of a life lost, pleas for remembrance. It wasn't vengeful, it was desperate. A soul trapped in oblivion, awakened by their intrusion. In a surge of courage, Sarah spoke up. "We're sorry, Eliza. You weren't forgotten. We see you now." They shared stories aloud, imagining her life, her dreams cut short. Slowly, the shadow softened, dissolving into the wind like mist in the sun. The air warmed, and a sense of peace settled over the cemetery. From that day on, the hauntings stopped. The friends never forgot the experience. It bonded them deeper, reminding them of the fragility of life and the importance of honoring the past. And the lesson here? Sometimes, the scariest things aren't monsters or ghosts, but the loneliness that comes from being truly forgotten. Respect the stories of those who came before us. They shape the world we walk in today.